Hey there, how are you doing today? Welcome to another live inside the Radiantly Live Woman. I am here to share some information today about scars that you have on your arm or particularly on your elbow. So when I say arm, let's talk about like armpit down into the forearm as a kind of general area that we're going to discuss and learn about today. So if you're new to these lives, thank you for being here. What we do twice a week in this Facebook community is I talk about a scar in particular. Now I'm not just choosing parts of the body at random. There is an announcement board at the top of this Facebook group, and it is where women inside this group are listing scars that they want to know more about. So right now, at the time of this recording, we have an incredible amount of people interested in scars, learning more about them. It's quite a significant thread. There's over 130 comments. And so I've been kind of knocking them one by one off the list. And today I wanted to talk about arms. I spend a lot of time talking about scars that are of very high importance. To me, in the way that I work in my system, Scars Reigniting the Feminine, we have these locations basically from the top of your head to your pelvic floor that are of significant importance, meaning they are absolutely important and we need to work them fully so that you can feel better in your health and well-being. Now there's other scars on the body that are also very significant, and it really depends on the person, and it also depends on the symptoms that that person is feeling now. So if you have a scar on your limbs, like your arms or your legs, it could be of high significance. It's not that they aren't. There are just methods that I use to help determine if they are of extreme value. Value meaning if you work them fully, you will notice a significant improvement in your well-being. I'm not just talking about the physical well-being. I'm talking about your energy, as well as your emotions, as well as your inner trust and confidence, your sense of self. All of this can come from working your scars. So we're going to talk about arm scars, and there's a variety of different things that could go on in this area. So we'll talk about surgeries that could have gone on. Talking about removals of things. Just talking about accidents, like maybe you've nicked a part of your arm somewhere. Something has gone on, you've had an elbow surgery, whatever it is, we're going to learn about how these are significant. We always touch on 3 different things in all of these videos. The first thing is talking about the physical considerations, which is very important because we want to understand our physical body and how the scar is impacting it. This is a really great foundational place to start, because when you understand your body well, which is right in front of you, it kind of gives way or gives you an opportunity to enter into the emotional and energetic considerations, which is our second part. This section is potentially a little bit more abstract or maybe subtle because it really depends on each person. How the surgery, the accident, whatever has created the scar, how that scar impacts each woman is completely unique. And so we need to take that into consideration. So we're going to be talking about energetic and emotional considerations as well. And then the final section that's really important to me that we will always touch on is the what to do. Now that you've learned all this stuff about arm and elbow scars, what are you actually going to do? How can you action something to progressively move forward? So we're going to talk about a style of movement that I have created called flushing. I used to do this style of movement when I used to teach yoga classes, and I've been using it now for quite some time in the way that I help women transform their well-being by working their scars. So I'm going to give you a little brief introduction to it, the flushing 101, so you can start to understand it and see how beneficial it is. So let's begin with the physical considerations, like I said. Again, from armpit to kind of forearm area. Let's just not think about the wrist and hand because that's kind of like a whole different beast. So let's just think about the arm, including the armpit, down to the wrist. What I want you to think about in this area is a few things physically. The most important thing that I want you to think about is drainage of the lymphatic and fluid, the circulatory system. The way that this area drains will greatly impact the kind of health of this whole area. So you may know this, I'm sure you have felt this at some point in your life if you've had swollen glands inside your armpit, or maybe like a deodorant has irritated you or whatever. You've felt those like bunchy marbles that come into your armpit that are a little sore and tender. That's when the lymphatic system is kind of bogged down and there's some sort of challenge in the lymph node. But we have lymph nodes all the way through. It's just that the lymph nodes get quite big and are highly dense and clustered in the armpit. So I want you to think of the lymphatic system as well as the circulatory system as this kind of river moving from like a high, thicker vessel, kind of like an ocean, moving down into something more like a stream. So it's getting narrower and smaller as you get to the tips of the fingers. So in the lymphatic, we have a high cluster of nodes in the elbow, as well as the armpit, and then it starts to get really quite dense as well into the neck and into the face. There's tons of lymphatic vessels and nodes in that area as well. Particularly underneath the collarbones is incredibly significant because that's the final kind of dumping ground that all the lymphatic pulls into, and that's where it kind of pushes in as its final push to get restored and kind of recycled. So we're going to touch on, because we gotta talk about the neck when we're talking about the arm. So we'll also touch on that in a moment. But I really want you to think and visualize how having a scar in that area can impact the vessels here. The arm is, as you know, significantly smaller than the leg. So the vessels are much more narrow, they're much smaller, and they're also more condensed. So we want to think about that when we have a scar. So I often describe the scar that we have on our body as like a bunch of wads of gum or Spider-Man's web. Whichever visualization works for you more, run with that. And I want you to feel like when you have scarring there, it starts to kind of mesh in, and always scar tissue is looking for something solid to anchor onto as the healing is going on. So when you have a lot of webbing and you're looking for bone, the scar tissue can run quite deep. Now, particularly in like somewhere like the elbow, for example, the bone is kind of, it's right there. Most people have very bony elbows. So it may not be that the scar tissue is so impacted and deep in the elbow. However, the elbow does have quite a lot of range. It's a really simple joint. It functions just a little bit more complicated than a door hinge. It goes flex, extend, and it actually rotates into two different directions. It does a kind of pronation and a supination-like movement, internal, external-like movement. So when you have a lot of movement in an area, the scar will start to embed to make sure that it's good to go for all these different styles of movement. So because this is a somewhat simple joint, there may not be a ton of scar tissue in the area, but there still will be lots. If it's right on a joint, you will always have a significant amount of scar tissue because it has to bury down to make sure it's good to go for that movement, the rotating, and the rotating. This is why when we have scar tissue on our abdomen or anywhere on our torso, really, it's really important and much more significant because the range of motion that we have at our spine and like in our hips or in our, in this whole kind of area is much more than a door hinge. So that's another way to just think about the significance of the areas, limbs versus torso. Torso has an incredible amount of range. It can move in all different types of direction. And so therefore the scar tissue will be bearing more significantly as it looks for bone and making sure that it's okay for all of those types of movements. But nonetheless, the bone is quite close, but some of us have, quite muscular arms or shoulders or forearms now. We use our forearms quite a lot for all the desk work and kind of stuff that we do. So there could be a significant amount of scar tissue in your upper limb. So I want you to imagine that the vessels should ideally be like fully open to allow for stuff to enter and stuff to exit, just like free flowing movement of the fluids. When you have scar tissue, it's pinched or contracted or compromised. It's not its nice round circle anymore. It's somehow, just in a different shape. And that creates more pressure in the body. That creates more challenge to move stuff with ease, not just bring good things in, but be able to take stuff out and away. So when we're talking about toxins, debris, just having challenge trying to get more muscle fluidity, like having a better improvement of how your muscles are actually contracting, including like flexibility, that all matters. So that is something I want you to think about for the lymphatic, especially if you have it up in here. Like if your scar is in this upper arm, it's going to be definitely a challenge on the lymphatic system. And like I said, once it comes here, it kind of starts to go into its final dumping ground, which is right underneath or behind the collarbone. So let's talk about the arms in a different light for a second. So we just went circulatory system. Let's talk about the nerves. Everything that your arm is capable of doing is because of the nervous tissue that is there that begins, its origin is in the neck. So all of your muscles are plugged into your nervous system. And all of those nerves go directly into your neck, somewhere different. In particular, like the back of your arm will have its like nerve origin, like kind of lower in the neck, and there are all these different places that it attaches. But in a general sense, everything that has muscle function in the arm is coming from your neck. So when we're talking about arm scars, when we're talking about arm function, we have to have a conversation about neck. Your neck needs to move well. You need to have good movement in your neck to allow for those nerves to be getting the impulses into the right area of the body. And so we need to take that into consideration as well, which is one of the reasons why when I teach women flushing, we learn and understand why the neck is important. The other thing that's very obvious is the arm is plugged into a bunch of other stuff, including the shoulder blade and the rib cage and the collarbone. So the shoulder joint in particular is kind of a funky joint. It attaches onto many things. And so all of that plugs into your thoracic spine, which is the part of your spine where you have your ribs. You have 12 vertebrae of your thoracic spine and 12 ribs. So the arm and how it functions will greatly impact these areas, neck and thoracic spine, collarbone and shoulder blade. And so there's this kind of harmony that needs to happen. There's this dynamic movement and exchange that needs to happen in the area. So if you have a scar on your arm, it will be challenging just that simple movement. So let's just talk about these arm lines for a moment. I like to help get a better visual with the arm, or anywhere in general, using the Thomas Myers anatomy trains. If anyone is a visual learner, I highly suggest just coming along with me and doing a little Googling. So you're gonna look up Thomas Myers. You're gonna look up arm lines. So Thomas Myers arm lines. And you can also look up as a secondary Google, Thomas Myers functional line. There's gonna be some really cool images. You'll see some anatomy skeletons with these blue strips of tissue on them. This is how I want you to start thinking about the connection of your arm up towards the torso and then vice versa. The idea of these lines is it's part of the fascial system, which has no beginning, no end. It's just a continuous envelopment of the whole muscular system, including all the connective tissue, which helps us when we're thinking about healing physically, how we can create, how we can kind of link in our mind like an elbow scar or a forearm scar into neck pain. It's very easy to make that kind of suggestive understanding or kind of leap when you look at these arm lines. So you can see how these arm lines go all the way to the tips of the fingers, particularly the arm line. There's two different ones. You'll see like a front view and then you'll see a back view. And what you're actually seeing on those images is you'll see like a deep version, like muscles that are more deep to the center, and then a superficial version. So you'll see like they have different muscles shown on that single man, but that's only because they're showing you the superficial and the deep version. But what I want you to mostly get is that it's coming from the core, coming from the torso. It's coming either from the chest or from the traps in the back, and then it's coming down into the tips of the fingers. Now for the functional line, it's super cool to see because there's these big sweeping seatbelt-like shapes in these blue men. So this is really cool to think about because the shoulder, like say you have this is my left shoulder, you have a scar on your bicep or in your armpit, it can immediately start to impact the opposite hip. And that is because of these fascial lines. You may have tightness in your groin. You may have a hernia, or you're prone to feeling that kind of tension in there. If you flip around and look at the back of that functional line, you can start to see the big, huge sweeping lat and how it crosses into the opposite glute, the opposite buttocks and hamstring. This is a very interesting thing to think about when you're thinking about your armpit or your scar on your arm and how it could be irritating your opposite SI joint, or how it could be giving you like a chronic hamstring strain. Okay, so this is how I'm thinking. And I want you to kind of start to see that full picture as well. So Let me go back into my notes here. These are the important things I want you to think about physically. Starting to like map out your own kind of dysfunction physically so you can start to see the impact of the scar on your arm or on your elbow. Now, what I also want to kind of bring out here is oftentimes when we have a scar somewhere, we are very likely to not actually feel any kind of symptomology at the scar itself. Where we're more likely to feel or notice it is in like the weakest link in the chain is what I call it. And usually the weakest link in the chain is somewhere where everything gets small, compacted, compressed, somewhere like down the chain. So you may have a scar like in your armpit or even in your neck, for example, but you have wrist pain. That's super common because this wrist is having to compensate and do so much because there's tension and stuckness going on like higher up. This is very common, if you have wrist stuff and you don't know why it's going on, if you have sore elbows or hands or anything like that, you don't know why it's why it's happening, think about the connection, those lines that I showed you, the functional lines by Thomas Myers, but also just intuitively start to recognize that of course this stuff is connected and that everything's lined up, and if it's not working well up here because of a scar, it's going to impact something lower down, stuff where it gets smaller, where it gets more compact. There's not a lot of space for movement, especially in the hand. There's these tiny little hand bones. This is a huge like articulation hotspot, which is the exact same for the foot. There's tons of little bones, tons of little articulations that could be easily disturbed by scar tissue. All right, so that's what I want to talk about for the physical. Now let's just touch on the emotion and the energy around this scarring that could be anywhere from here to here. This, like I said, is a lot more abstract to think about, but it doesn't need to be. It's most important that when you're thinking about these areas on your body that you think about your own story and how the scar occurred. If it was an accident, obviously that caught you off guard. If there was, maybe you slipped and fell, maybe it was a motor vehicle accident, whatever it was, there's some sort of emotion attached to that whole experience. And then we want to go way bigger and more detailed as well. We want to think about how the scar has impacted you emotionally. That one's a little bit more obvious that we can talk about. Like, what have you changed since then? What has changed in your lifestyle, the way that you move, maybe the activities that you choose to do? There's a lot of things that we could be restricting or avoiding, and we may not even know it. It's really common that when something hurts, we just avoid it. And then over time, we end up like backing ourselves into a really tight corner where we don't have a lot of options. When we end up doing that, consciously or unconsciously, we end up getting sick. We end up getting tired and strained because we have boxed ourselves into such a small kind of container that we don't really know how to get ourselves out of that. But we also have spent so much time just avoiding things that we should be working on and moving towards improving. So I've seen this so many times when people are really desperate to have help, which is usually how people come to see me. When I was a clinical therapist, I had the people who would come in and say, I've been to everything and I've tried everyone and no one's helping. I had this like kind of desperation style of people that would come in, and it's very often that they have so much going on in their life and they've just done the avoidance technique, the cut that out routine, and then they're just so confined to a very small little area where they can move comfortably in, and that's very draining and depleting over time. So I want you to think about that as as an emotional quality. Then something that you may not be aware of is the energetic kind of thing that could go on when you have a scar somewhere. Anytime you have a scar somewhere and your body is not functioning optimally, meaning like you're not able to go through the correct range of motion, but even more than that, like in the fluid system, in the like neurology, in your like organ systems, if things are not being able to go somewhere and come out with ease, it bogs everything down. It creates a lot of compensation, it creates a lot of challenge that can be built up over time, and this is just like putting a damper on your energy, especially if you're having to compensate a lot with different angles that your body's having to choose. Instead of going through the path of least resistance, it's having to go through all of this like bogginess to try to get done what it needs to get done. And humans are pretty amazing in this sense, in that we always, most of the time, when we give our body a request, our body is able to meet that demand, but it just depends on what cost. Like over time, these types of patterns will break us down, and this creates a strain on our energy. So this is another thing to think about. I want you to think about your energy as far as like the day-to-day stuff. Do you have those energy dips in 3 o'clock every day? Do you feel super tired after you eat? Do you feel like as soon as your workday is over, you cannot do anything but lay down on the couch and just kind of vegetate? This is really quite common in people, especially the way that we kind of force ourselves through all the daily tasks that we set up for ourselves. So we really want to be mindful of that energy. Like, what are we actually feeling in our energy on a day-to-day? Then some other things I want to talk about. So in this section, I like to talk about other types of sciences. So my background is in Western kind of, modern science. I have a clinical background. That's how I started. And eventually that only got me so far. I needed to lean somewhere else to find a more full picture of the body, to understand myself and the people that I was working with from a more holistic, like integrative approach. And so I started to lean into understanding and studying and doing some self-practice around Eastern tradition, philosophy, all their medicine. So I want to talk about that from an Ayurvedic perspective, as well as just briefly touch on some things you want to just look at from a Chinese medicine perspective. So the first thing I want to do, just in a really simple general way, I want you to view the arms as like an extension from your heart. Your arms, especially your hands, are like a giving, receiving kind of place, and it can create this kind of loop from your center, from your heart space. I'm not talking about the actual physical heart anymore, I'm talking about the kind of energetic space that's in the center of our rib cage. I want you to kind of feel into the idea that the arms are just an extension of that. So when you have some challenges in your arms, it could also be translated into challenging with that feeling from the heart space, feeling of being able to give, or feeling like you're able to receive, anything like that related to heart, like a real heart sense, a feeling sense. Maybe you're having trouble actually connecting to feeling and emotion just in general. Maybe when people give you a compliment, you find that really challenging and you kind of buffer it and kind of sidestep it and avoid it, instead of just receiving that and enjoying and appreciating the comment. So all of these more subtle things can come up when you have scarring on your arms, because these channels are not free-flowing, like I said. Just like in the circulatory system, just like in the lymphatic, I want you to view the arms as having these energetic extensions, channels, through all the way out to the hands. Quite literally you're giving and receiving in a physical way, but you can also think about it as an extension, just in a more metaphorical sense. So think about that as it relates to the heart center, your connection to your heart, how that all impacts, how the scarring impacts that connection, and just look at it like how you relate to people, your relationship dynamics that you have, co-workers, your children, spouse, anyone. Have a just investigative look at that. Then from a Chinese medicine perspective, I just want to highlight a few of the channels that run through the arms. So I'm not a Chinese medical doctor or practitioner, I'm just a self-study kind of geek. So you're welcome to explore this on your own, but I do want to just point these out so you can maybe look them up online and just be curious about your body. The most important thing that I like to give out is curiosity to the body. We spend a lot of time not liking parts about our body, or feeling really confused and disconnected from our body. We're relying on, or we're outsourcing a lot of stuff about ourselves, about like treatment or healing processes or healing our wounds or working on our scars. We're outsourcing it out to others, which is a necessary step, but we could also be doing a lot of the curiosity stuff ourselves. We could be exploring, doing types of reflection, just investigating these types of thoughts and really feeling into them, not just from a mental sense, but also as a way to reconnect with the body. So the meridians, Chinese meridians that are in the arms, I'm just gonna list them out and then just briefly describe the qualities of them. So there's the large intestine. So when we talk about organs, I know that they're like in the torso, but the Chinese meridians are either kind of running down the torso into the legs, or they're going in the opposite direction from the legs up into the torso, or they're coming along the arms or coming from the fingertips going to the center. So large intestine is in the arms, interestingly enough. It's not in your gut or in your legs. The lung, which is a little bit more obvious, you have a line that comes in the arm to here for the lungs. Then you have pericardium and heart. So heart is obvious. The pericardium in a like Western model, just so you kind of understand the terminology, is the kind of tissue or the connective tissue that protects and surrounds and encases the heart, just so you know what that word means. The small intestine is also in the arms. It's in the back channel of the arms. And then we have another organ that we don't identify with so much in Western science, but it's called the triple warmer. So think about these areas in your body and how they're functioning, how they are feeling on a day-to-day. And then just in general, just connecting with your kind of emotion around the scar. So I always give a blueprint, like a roadmap to the way that I like to help people see the energy and the emotion related to the scar. So you always want to think about the before the accident, surgery, whatever it was that created the scar. What was going on internally, emotionally? You know, what was your general vibe? What was your inner dialogue? What was going on in your life around that time before? The during is kind of the more obvious one. If it was an accident or a surgery, there's always a fear element involved. That's a kind of a guarantee. So think about that, as well as think about the dynamics and relationships of the people around you at that time. I often talk about medical staff, how you felt and the way that they provided you care. Even if they provided the best kind of care and you like that was their intention, it may not have come out or felt like that because you're in a state of fear, because you were, you know, doing something scary like receiving surgery. Or maybe it was the first time you had surgery. So you always want to think about those dynamics, as well as anyone that was taking care of you during that time. Partner, spouse, kids, friends, whatever. Think about how that all felt at that time period. And then the after. The after phase is kind of a long extending phase, depending on how long the scar has been there. Like I said in the beginning of this section, you want to think about the emotional qualities that are living in you now because of the scar. You know, is there stuff that you don't do, stuff that you avoid, you know, the way that you feel about your body now, all of these things, what you can and can't do, you know, what clothes you do and don't wear, all of these things are like the kind of superficial layer that can take you very deep. So we want to use those as like an entry point, but then go much deeper into those kind of qualities, because it's much more than, you know, I'm not choosing to wear shirts now that show my scar. There's something more significant in there that we want to explore. So that is the three kind of roadmap phases that I like to line out for the emotional and energetic, because like I said, it can feel kind of abstract and subtle. You need to put yourself into what I'm saying to make it real and kind of bring stuff out for you. All right, now let's go into the third part, what to do. What do you do with a scar that you have on your arm? Anywhere from your armpit to your wrist. How can you start to work that scar in a way that feels safe, in a way that feels like you're reconnecting back in with your body, and most importantly, you're starting to transform your well-being by working this scar. At the beginning of this video, I wanted to comment on giving you like a flushing 101. So flushing is a style of movement that I had created a few years back in yoga classes that I was teaching, and women just loved it. I got so many women in my yoga classes just from doing this style of movement, and I started to see the incredible impact that it was having on their well-being. Because what flushing is really doing is it's starting to move the fluids, it's starting to move the circulation, move the lymphatic in a way that is very unique. The movements are actually very simple, but when you understand what it is that you're doing, it can create a much more full picture, and you start to appreciate the movements much more. So flushing 101, ideally what you're trying to do in the body is completely close a joint as well as completely open it. So this may seem like a little confusing if you don't have a good anatomy knack, and that's okay, because with the elbow in particular, like it's pretty simple. You can do an extension, a flexion, you can do a rotate and a rotate. It's pretty simple. In the shoulder, it's a ball and socket. There's some wildness going on, but in general, you want to pulse in and out of one movement and then go into its opposite. Okay, so you're going into position number A, finding position B, and you're going in and out of that range, back and forth. That, if you can start to like visualize like pumping of fluid as you do that. You're moving stuff, you're getting some stuckness to start to move. So that's what flushing is. It's a very dynamic style of movement where I'm trying to, or I've created these movements where you get as much closure in as many joints as you can that are related to the arm. So we spoke about the neck, we spoke about the importance of the shoulder, the spine, the thoracic spine, and the elbow, trying to get all that moving in a particular way to completely compress and close it off, and then to completely open it up and let that fluid fly, so to speak. And that's not really flying, but you know what I mean. So flushing is what we want to do as a preliminary thing in the arms. A lot of us hold tension in our arms. Our breathing styles are not great. We're breathing like with our chest and up in here. So a lot of us have a lot of tension through, and flushing helps to move that along. So I'm going to give you a super simple flushing version that I can do right now in this video where you can kind of see what I'm doing. But just know that there's more detail, and just having that little foundational piece, you can start to explore it in your own way if you would like. So before you do flushing, before you do anything that's specific to the scar, I want you to just take a step back and apply my three-part practice. This three-part practice you need to do with every single scar, and you need to do it at the beginning. Why do you need to do this first? Because a lot of people don't yet know how important scars are. They don't recognize how much impact the scar is. You may feel it in a sense, like we're just intuitively like, yeah, obviously that impacts my body, but we don't quite get the gravity of that yet. And so this three-part practice helps you to kind of touch into the area for a moment. It helps you to get a sense of, oh yeah, there's some like transformation potential here. Like there is some stuff going on. The good thing about recognizing this is then you immediately start to think, oh yeah, I can use the scar to transform all of these things. Because if you are feeling like tension, stuckness, some people touch the scar and they feel nausea, they feel angry, they feel sad, they start crying, they go into like, you know, rage or resentment. There's the whole range of stuff. I've seen it all. And you could also feel nothing. You could feel like totally numb, and that's information for you as well. So you need to take this preliminary step to gather this information to then go into flushing. And there's a whole process, a kind of an evolution that I go through. There's 6 body practices in my system, and I help women really just reconnect with their body, rid that scar of any type of like challenge on the physical, the emotional, and the energy. Okay, so what's the 3-part practice? Super simple, very quick. The first phase is relaxing into. What do you do here? You gotta find somewhere you're comfortable, bedroom, living room, wherever. Sit or lay comfortably. Know you're gonna be here a little while, 5, 10, 20 minutes, doesn't matter. Just you gotta, don't just do it 5 minutes in between Zoom calls. that doesn't count. Give yourself the opportunity to really touch into something meaningful. Make skin to skin contact. So wherever your scar is, you have to touch it skin to skin. And I want you to really meaningfully touch it. Not just like you're splashing on lotion or putting on makeup or putting on clothes. Like have a moment with yourself that says, I am intentionally touching an area that I have maybe consciously or unconsciously avoided because I know that it's a site of pain. And now I'm choosing something different. Now I'm choosing another way. You don't have to go full tilt into that, but just softening into the idea that, okay, I think I'm ready now and I want to start opening this door. This is a very important step. Then the 4th is just close your eyes. Tone down the sense of sight and increase and ramp up the sense of touch. Very helpful when you're doing this exercise. Part 2, gather as much physical stuff as you can. Gather as many physical considerations as you can about the scar. What does that mean? I want you to feel into like hypersensitivity as well as just total numbness. As well as what does it make you feel? Some people feel incredibly sick, dizzy, nausea. They didn't even know until they touched it and they have a strong aversion to it. Maybe you feel like absolutely nothing. This is also, like I said, really important because you want to be aware, like I'm walking around and I'm totally disconnected from a whole part of my body. That's something we need to change, something we need to be aware of and change. So also temperature, cold, hot, what's going on? How does it feel? Is there like heat going on, or is it cold and you know, just that cold kind of disconnect feel? Then you want to feel into areas of tension. Areas where the scar is lifted or like raised, bunched up, areas where it's kind of squished and tensed and tight in. You want to feel where there's like pulling, snagging, where the skin is not moving with as much ease or movement. You want to feel into all that, really recognize it. Know that the more you touch your body, the more you touch your scar, the more you will feel. I have a sense of touch that's just highly developed because of all the bodies and people that I've worked with. So it's easier for me to just tap into it right away. However, it's not like I'm doing something magical. You just need to practice, and you need to just feel into it and do it as a relationship building exercise. The more you touch your body, the more you know yourself, in just a super simple way. Then the third part is you want to gather as much energetic, emotional kind of qualities around the scar itself. Use the roadmap as your guide before the event, during, and after. You may be the type of person that just touches, connects, drops into emotion, and it just comes up and it's really accessible and easy and obvious. You may be the type of person where you go into it and you're like, Kendra, I don't know what you're talking about, but I do not feel what you're saying. And that's okay too. Know that it has nothing to do with you. It has something to do with just time and effort and just having this relationship building kind of quality that needs to happen. You will feel emotion related to the scar. It's just when and how much and what is it? Can you put a name and a label on it? That's really important. It's very validating to know that some of the stuff you've been dealing with, like say you feel like this constant tension and like pressure and you just feel on edge, you feel irritated and you feel kind of like, you know, you're trying to keep your lid on and it just feels overwhelming, and then you don't know where it's coming from. You feel like, oh, my life's really busy, but even if I calm down my life, it's still there. Where is this coming from? And you touch the scar and it just goes like, you know, aha moments, light bulb. You can feel that that's the site because the story behind the scar is this. That's a very impactful moment. So it will come, and oftentimes it takes conversations with someone like myself to help you really unpack. But just as a beginner, just try it out and see how it is. So that's the 3-part practice. See how that goes for this scar, anywhere from your armpit to your wrist, as well as you got to do it for every other scar in your body. Every scar has its own unique story. Every scar matters. We just want to know how much, like where is everything placing, ranking style, which is what I do with my clients. All right, so that's the first part. Now the second part, to go into flushing. Let's see if I can move myself so I can see you, so you can see me. Okay, so flushing in the arm. Super simple, very simple. What you want to do is, let's say that I have an elbow scar. It's just the most obvious one for us to think about because you can see it moving really easily on the screen as well. Let's say I got a big scar on my elbow. Say it's like, oh no, say it's right here. Say it's, what is this? Golfer's elbow. Okay. Golfer's elbow scar. I got a surgery. It sucked. It hurts. And it's not really feeling the same since. I want to go in between position number A, position number B, and I want to include as many joints as I can. So ideally, you're thinking about moving the wrist, the elbow, the arm, and the neck in and out of an oscillation, position A, position B. There's 3 planes of motion, and it can get a little complicated, but just in a super simple sense, let's do 3 planes of motion. Sorry, let's do a single plane of motion. We're going to flex the wrist, flex the elbow. I'm going to do this so you can see. Flex the shoulder, and I'm going to actually side bend away with my head, okay? So I'd side bend away, I flex my shoulder, I flex my wrist, I flex my elbow. So that's a triple flexion and a side bend, just because it would be weird to side bend into I don't have enough space. So I'm going to side bend away just for the video. Then that's position number A. Position B is the exact opposite of all these things. So I'm going to extend my wrist, extend my elbow, extend my shoulder, side bend towards, okay? So I'm doing a triple extend, bing, 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 side bend in the opposite direction. Go into it again. You're flushing and pushing all of this gunk out, getting some nice movement wherever you have your scar, in this case example here. So how do you do this as an exercise? What I want you to do is spend anywhere between like 5 to 10 seconds in each position. There's a reason for that, so just feel into, you could spend a little bit longer there just to feel out that you got the movement right. Spend 10 seconds, do a breath or two, and then move into the second position, position B, stay there for 10 seconds. You want to do just like pulse in and out of that anywhere between 8 to 12 times. And then you want to come to like complete rest. Like just let your arms relax down by your side and have a moment experiencing what's going on here. Where, like, what is happening? Is it warm? Is it tingly? Do you feel rush? Do you feel light, heavy? You want to feel the movement of the fluid, and particularly you want to feel the area of the scar. You want to feel what's going on there. You can touch it if you want, but I mean just like actually have a sensorial awareness of the area. So that is in a really simple sense, flushing 101. This is how you should be doing it with your arm scar. Arms from the scars from the armpit to the wrist is what we're talking about today. If you have any questions about that, about scars in the area, as well as this flushing exercise, please let me know. You can ask me in this live right now, or you can always just think about it, try it out, ask me a question on this thread. I'm very happy to answer any questions that anyone has. It's really important to me that when we go through these things together, that you feel like you have a place to start. So many things right now on the internet is just like barraging you with content and information, but not quite giving you an action plan, like a step forward. So this is your step forward. It's a really significant one. It's flushing is incredibly impactful when you do it correctly, especially when you're doing it accurately in the right plane of motion with the right type of speed. And wonderful things can happen as a step for flushing. Now, flushing you don't do like across the board. There's other pieces that you need to add in and different types of movement and different breathing practices, but just as a step, I wanted to offer that to you. I don't see any questions coming in, so I think I'm going to leave it there for now. Please ask questions if you got them later. Thank you for joining me. It's been nice to have to be back doing these lives. I took a little vacation, a little holiday time. We did a wonderful video yesterday, which was really great, and we did chin and jaw scars yesterday, and here we are doing arms. So stay tuned for next week's live. I would love to have you join. If you have any questions about a scar in particular, write it in the announcement page at the top of this Facebook group. Thank you and have a good day. Bye.